Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about something that you may be doing to others. They may be doing it to you. It has a pretty significant impact on your life. Or it may be a term that you've heard a ton of times and you're not even sure what it means. Today, we're talking about gaslighting. Yes, gaslighting. We're going to dig into that. We have success strategy coach Tom Marino with us. Hey, Tom, how are you today?
I'm great, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. And I'll be honest, a while back when I started hearing that term, and it seems to be very relevant now, I had to actually look up what gaslighting meant. I wasn't even 100% sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And you know, it's more common of a term used today, I think, by that younger generation. But it's something that, you know, has really surfaced a lot in my coaching business and with a lot of my clients, especially in how they feel they've been treated by their parents. And it really comes into self-confidence and how it disrupts your self-confidence and creates self-doubt. So, you know, gaslighting, just to be technical for a moment, it refers to the intentional attempts to manipulate you into doubting your feelings, perception of events, and reality in general. You know, if someone's trying to gaslight you, they want to confuse you and make you doubt yourself and make you more likely, you know, to go along with what they want, right? So it's important to recognize that a lot of people use this term very loosely, but understand that there is an intentional component to this, that someone is intentionally doing this to you to create a different reality for you that really does not exist, right? You know, not to pick on politicians, but politicians are very good at gaslighting. You know, they'll gaslight their opponents, like, and deny that certain things. No, that didn't happen, and no, you must be crazy, or you're overthinking that, or, you know, you're imagining things. That's a very common term. You know, you're imagining things. You don't know what you're talking about. Those are terms that are used by someone who is gaslighting. Now, in your everyday life, somebody may say the same thing to you, but it's the intention with which it's being used, right? It's so I use politicians as an example because they're the ones more likely to say, you're imagining things. That's not how it happened, right? When someone doesn't take blame, and this is where the to me versus for me mindset comes in. Mm-hmm. It's part of that mindset where, you know, you're blaming other things and other situations and creating a construct that really didn't exist.
Tom, I really think you're overthinking everything right now. And the word overthinking, I think, is a classic connection to the gaslighting. That's one of the terms that kind of fits within there. So I wonder, is narcissism similar to gaslighting?
Yeah, there's some overlap. Yes, a narcissistic will gaslight, right? Because part of it is their attempt to make you love them, right? Because that's what a narcissist wants. A narcissist needs to be loved by everybody. They need to see themselves as, oh, everybody loves me. And, you know, I can speak of a specific president that we recently had that was very narcissistic. But I won't go into that here. But the bottom line is that there's this desire to be loved by everybody. So if you want everybody to love you, you have to pretty much create the reality for which they will love you in. And that is where they'll try to confuse you to thinking differently about a situation, or it's a manipulation. You have to remember, it's a manipulation. People with borderline personality disorder, people with, and in the clusters of personality, borderline and narcissism are in the same cluster in the DSM-5 around, you know, being that what do you call it? That emotionally based, you know, manipulative type of personality. And that's where the manipulation is the key.
How do you, while we're on narcissism, and by the way, when I heard that term, I don't know, like a year or two ago, I had to Google that one too. What that meant. How is narcissism, or a narcissist, how is that diagnosed? How is that officially determined that that person is doing that they are one?
Yeah, well, that is one of the things, in psychiatry, when you look at the DSM, there's personality disorders are different type. They're a class 2 type of diagnosis, and most people do not diagnose people with personality disorders. Okay. So, but there are traits that people exemplify in their day to day that puts them into that category. And a lot of people will shy away from that. I remember teaching this to the PA students at Downstate when I was teaching intro to psychiatry. I did that for many years at Downstate in Brooklyn. And I remember saying, someone has a personality disorder when you think they're a complete a-hole. Bottom line. That's the bottom line. That's how someone has a personality disorder. So think of people in your life that exemplify that complete, a-hole personality type, where you just, no matter what you do, they think they're better than you, or they try to squash you down, or they don't take any recognition of themselves, and their self-awareness is very low, and they're very manipulative, and they always seem to just be that jerk, so to speak. Right. And that's kind of how you look at it. And you could think of several people in this world that just have significant personality disorders.
I don't want to go there. I don't want to think that. But when you think that, it's like, well, you know what? I guess that is the case for certain people that, in your circle that's in your mind after you just said that.
And personality disorders really create our predispositions to other forms of mental illness, right? Like we see a very close relationship between a borderline personality, somebody who can be your best friend one minute and your worst enemy the next. That manipulation, that type of manipulation where they're very friendly when they want something from you, but the second you don't give them what they want, they turn on you. That's a borderline. We see a lot of that correlate to people who have bipolar disorder. You see bipolar disorder, that person who cycles between mania and depression, and there's 2 different types of bipolar, but you are looking at someone who is cycling from that Jekyll and Hyde kind of place, right? It's borderline is a Jekyll and Hyde kind of place, and it's when you get into all of that, most people with significant personality disorders, personality type disorders, they have some other very diagnosable mental disorder. So there is a way to see it. And there are strong correlations between personality and whatnot. Like we have odd personalities like schizoid personality. A schizoid personality type is more predisposed to schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder and other types of mental health situations. The thing is you can't treat a personality disorder with medication. You can't treat that. And that's probably the easiest way I can explain it. You can't treat a personality disorder, but you can treat the other mental health disorders that manifest as a result of some predisposition for something else. But that's getting way into psychiatry more than
I find it fascinating. And I think a lot of people do. And you don't hear a lot about it. Right. Not going deep in, just kind of wondering about this, and then we'll get back onto gaslighting and even narcissism, because I'm seeing a correlation there. Can you, let's say if somebody, you suspect they're bipolar, or maybe you suspect they're a narcissist, can they be a little bit in that direction, or they are, and that's what it is? You know what I'm saying? Is it kind of toe over the line?
Here's any time someone diagnosed with some kind of mental health disorder, like a bipolar, depression, and anxiety, there has to be an element of functional impairment in your day-to-day life, right? How it impacts you, whether in your work, in your relationships, or whatever, there's some kind of functional impairment that exists when diagnosing somebody with, say, a bipolar disorder, right? They can't function. They cause major disruption to their relationships. They find themselves in financial holes because in some of their mania, they're going and spending $50,000 on a credit card, or
that's a classic bipolar.
Yeah.
You go on a spending spree.
Yeah, exactly. You go on a spending spree, or you go into a hypersexual state where those are very manic tendencies. But there's significant functional impairment, right? You don't show up to work, because you're doing all these other things, right? You're not able to really take care of yourself either in those situations. You may not eat for days. You may not, because you're high on that mania or that situation. But it really is something that you can't say is a little bit of this. If you're saying it's a little bit of that, it's more likely a personality thing. But if it's more functionally impaired, it tends to be more of a diagnosable, treatable situation. So that's where you can draw a distinction, right? Like we all have little tendencies towards personality type disorders, right? I mean, some of us are a little odd, right? Some of us are a little eccentric, right? Eccentric and odd is one.
Little quirks.
Right. Anxious and avoidant and fearful, that's another type of cluster. And then you have your borderlines, your narcissists, your histrionics who are very dramatic, right? So like people who are dramatic and have these tendencies towards always being surrounded by drama, that's more of a personality issue than a diagnosable problem.
So
right?
what I get from that, Tom, is that you use the a-hole analogy before when somebody's definitely that.
Yep.
I guess it's almost when it's a personality thing, it's the difference between somebody being a jerk or a full-blown a-hole.
Right. Well, that's absolutely it. Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. And not having that awareness. It's the awareness and the understanding of what you're actually doing. And that's where, people who are borderline personalities, narcissists, they may be more intentional about gaslighting. They may be more intentional in their manipulation to make you feel lower than them, like you need them, right? Because they trivialize, right? Part of gaslighting is trivializing things, right? Minimizing your feelings about it. It's almost like you're overreacting. That classic, no, I'm not overreacting. I'm having an emotion right now. I'm allowed to have that emotion. I'm allowed to have a reaction, right? But you're trying to trivialize that and make that less in me so that I question it and I doubt my reaction to the situation, right? So trivializing is one of those tendencies of someone who's gaslighting you. And that could be someone who's manipulating you, who can have one of those personality disorders.
Don't a lot of guys do that in terms of, let's say they're with their partner, they're having a discussion and they don't really, a lot of guys don't communicate. They just, I don't want to deal with it right now. It's sort of like, and is it always gaslighting or manipulating, or he just doesn't want to hear it? Like, I don't want to deal.
It's the intentionality behind it that I would say is really important to understand. Are you intentionally doing it? Like, do you set out to when every argument that you have with your partner to put them down and make them feel less than? Because if that's your intention and if that's your mechanism, then you're gaslighting. But if you just don't want to deal with it and you're pushing it off, is it really gaslighting? Probably not. But again, tolerance and things like that change, right? Our tolerance to things changes. We may start out without that intention, but then that becomes the intention of every situation, right? So it's how do you maintain your control and whether or not you are manipulating intentionally. And, it's really, this exists everywhere. You see this in the corporate space, right? You see this in the corporate space all the time, where your thoughts or your suggestions are being minimalized, or they're being diverted, right? Like a boss, you may have a great idea about something, you approach your boss with it, and they say to you, "Oh, thanks for bringing up that concern, but here's where we're really going to head," right? And they immediately dismiss it. It's almost like a dismissive diversion kind of. But you see this in friendships, you see it at work, you see it in your relationships, you see it all over. It doesn't exist in just one place, but it's being able to recognize that, right? And being able to recognize that is critical, because if you can't recognize that you're being gaslighted, you're going to have a difficult time with your self-confidence and believing in yourself. And, there's a lot of feelings associated to how you're going to feel in those situations.
We have instant feedback. By the way, we're talking with success strategy coach Tom Marino. You can find him at tommarino.com. And Christine checks in from Hamden, Connecticut. And if you've got a question, got a comment, it's instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. She says, my husband is very controlling. He definitely gaslights me into thinking that I'm always wrong. What do I say to him when he does that?
Well, I think you have to present the facts. One of the things that, if you read a couple of the articles, and I found this really great article on Healthline, think you're being gaslighted. Here's how to respond, right? It's 8 ways of dealing with gaslighting is the easy search. And this is where I'm talking a lot from the article from. But gathering evidence, gathering facts, sticking to facts, being certain about your facts, right? Don't allow that person to create doubt in yourself. If you know something to be true, present the facts, right? That's kind of like what I tell people too. In any situation where you're going to have difficult conversation, remove the emotion from the conversation and focus on the facts of the situation. You want to create facts, right?
Yeah.
And you also want to create space. Like, instead of going at that person and saying you're doing that again, say, we're going to take a break from this conversation right now, and create that space. Go somewhere else, get into a different place, because creating the space is necessary, right? And, one of the things to kind of stop gaslighting too that they suggest in articles involving other people. So if you can engage with that person around a third party who's going to see the facts of the situation, that person may actually help in the communication process, right? So, if your husband is always, if they're very controlling, that is controlling is a form of manipulation, right? So you've got to be very aware of that. Like, what are the aspects of your life that they're controlling? And you've got to regain some control over those things that they keep controlling. But that's part of it is how do you respond is you know yourself, you you're telling the truth, that you're not imagining it, and you have to have your confidence that that's the case, and what was the rest of our question?
Basically that was it. I think you answered
Okay.
in terms of how to, and I love what you said about the facts. You can't change the facts. So let's say hypothetically in Christine's situation, let's say her husband talks about the money situation,
Right.
and let's say he's minimizing the fact that he's spending a lot of money, whatever it might be. All right, well, here's a credit card receipt.
Right.
What's that? What's this? What's that? I think that's
Exactly.
powerful, and that backs up, to your point that you're not imagining it. This is real.
Right. I mean, collecting evidence is always good, right? And that's where you have to be detective also, right? It's kind of like you're a detective in your own world, and it's not to make you paranoid or to make you more self-conscious about these things, but it is to back up your argument, right? So like one of the things that they suggest is saving screenshots of texts and emails, right? Like, that you said this. No, I didn't say that. Well, it's right here. It's right here in blue and white or green and white, however it comes up on your phone, Android or Apple.
Yep.
But it's right there. So save screenshots of things, like take pictures of things that maybe they can exaggerate in the future, or they can try to change what like really happened, right? Oh no, I didn't hit the car. I didn't bump the dent, put a dent in the bumper. Well, yeah, you did. Here's the picture of it.
Pictures
Right. So
don't lie. People do.
right. People, don't, and it's when you're dealing with this in a professional space too. And I want to bring this to a professional space, because when you have a boss that's doing stuff that is gaslighting you, right? That's making you feel less than, start to keep a trail on those things. Keep a trail on the emails, keep a trail on the conversations. Don't try not to have a conversation with them without a third party present, right? This is where a lot of people, if you're feeling this right now and you feel like you're being gaslighted by your boss, request HR be present at your next conversation. Have that protection, because HR is there as much to protect the employer as they are to protect the employee. They're that neutral third party to really help you get your point of view across if you're struggling to do that.
I would be always afraid to call in HR unless it's absolutely necessary. Like you've already gone through a number of situations where this is this could escalate into a different situation. And of course, as you're collecting your facts and everything, because you never know how that's going to go,
Right.
bring them in.
Yeah. And, Steve, it's important to recognize if you're really being gaslit, right? If you feel a certain way, if you're doubting or questioning yourself all the time, if you're apologizing frequently, if your immediate response is I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, that's someone who's been gaslit their entire life. They're constantly apologizing, right? If you wonder if you're too sensitive or not, or, if you struggle making decisions, you're being gaslit in some way. And I see this I have a client that, her whole life, she was an only child. She had parents that were very instructive and prescriptive on what she should be doing with her life. And now she has no self-confidence or no trust in herself to make good decisions because she feels like if she makes a decision and she's not good at it, it doesn't work out, that now she's only validating what she heard all those years from her parents. Right.
And she'll be judged. And she'll be judged on her decision.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm sorry I did that. I'm sorry I made that mistake. Right. And so it's that constant cycle over and over of those things.
It's almost like, the analogy of kick the dog. Once you keep kicking the dog is going to react the same way. And in this situation, the dog she is going to be afraid to make decisions. And just what you said, I know somebody that's very similar to that. And she had addiction issues way back in the day, got divorced, and her ex back then, he had to be gaslighting her because everything you just described is what she's like. Right. You could say anything and she'll say, I'm sorry. And then she'll try over and above to please and make, everything okay. Decisions, can't make decisions, worries a lot because she can't make the right decisions to move things forward. Right. And without a doubt, and even to the point during her divorce, and this is just an example, her ex minimized everything to the point where he got a big attorney and she got a smaller attorney from a small firm, and she got, if you will, hosed in the entire deal because he made her feel that way.
And that is just blatant manipulation.
Horrible. Yeah.
It's blatant. It's more than it's blatant manipulation.
Yeah.
And one of the things we have to realize too is we can self-gaslight, right? Based on our experiences of being gaslit, right?
Wow.
We can say to ourselves, oh yeah, if someone says you're too dramatic, you may say, oh yeah, I am very dramatic. And you start to believe that, right? But the way you got to turn that around is my emotions are valid. My feelings are valid. One of the things I always tell people to do is feel their feelings. Feel your feelings, express your feelings, be able to express your feelings because they are valid. You feel them and they really should be inarguable. But someone who's gaslighting is going to make your feelings very arguable or make you feel crazy or make you feel like you're overreacting or you're too sensitive. So be aware of how somebody else's gaslighting you turns into your own gaslighting when you're struggling in a situation or you're feeling less than.
That is so important what you just said, because no one can take your feelings away from you. They're your feelings. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it.
Right. And own it and allow yourself to feel it, but do something with it. Right. Take an act. Don't dwell in it. Take the action and pull yourself out of that feeling. Say, I'm feeling this way. How do I really want to be feeling? And then move to that place.
Let's talk about how you help people. Maybe somebody's listening, watching, going through a similar situation. It doesn't, now we say success strategy coach, but success is also succeeding in your life, your personal life as well.
Right. Yeah. Success is all about how you define success for your life. And that's what I really help people to do is I help them to define what that success looks like for them. And then we work on the strategies to get you there. And that's what I mean by success strategy. Sure. And it should be your life success. That's what I'm focused on is your life success, not your personal, not your professional, your full life success, not separating the two. So, if you are, and gaslighting, a lot of my clients suffer from that. They've been the victims of gaslighting. So, if you want, reach out to me at tommarino.com. That's tommarino.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Tom Marino Coaching, and DM me, send me a message, leave a comment on my website, and I'll be happy to offer a complimentary session to you to just talk to you to see if there's something that we can work on together and if I can help you.
Yeah, I'm so glad we talked about this because the term keeps coming up, and I'll bet, like almost guarantee, people are watching, hearing this, and didn't realize that maybe they were being gaslit, or
Right.
maybe they were doing it. Kind of figured that out, put the connected the dots, and figured out what was actually going on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have a pleaser and avoider saboteur, you're a prime victim for gaslighting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tom, always a pleasure. And you've got such great insight on everything, and relevant stuff too, which is why we love having you on. I appreciate it.
Fantastic, Steve. Thanks for having me. It's been great. I'll talk to you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.